What started as a routine celebrity interview turned into television chaos when Nicolas Cage and Jimmy Kimmel erupted into an explosive confrontation that ended with security escorting the Oscar winner off set. "Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Nicolas Cage," Kimmel announced with his trademark grin, though something felt forced about his enthusiasm tonight. The host shuffled his index cards nervously, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the sharp-eyed actor sitting across from him. "Thank you for having me, Jimmy," Cage replied, his voice carrying that familiar gravelly tone that had captivated audiences for decades. He leaned back in his chair with practiced ease, but his posture suggested a coiled spring ready to release. Kimmel dove straight into his prepared material, launching into what he clearly thought was harmless banter. "So, Nick, I have to ask about your recent comments regarding method acting and how some of today's younger actors are, quote, playing dress-up instead of becoming the character. That was pretty harsh, don't you think?" The question hung in the air like smoke before a fire. Cage's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, his eyes narrowing as he processed not just the words, but the condescending tone behind them. The studio audience, sensing tension, grew quieter. "I think my words were taken out of context," Cage responded carefully, his voice maintaining its measured cadence. "What I said was that true transformation requires commitment that goes beyond surface-level performance. It's about finding truth in fiction." Kimmel smirked, clearly pleased with himself as he prepared his follow-up. "Come on, though, isn't that just a fancy way of saying other actors aren't as good as you? I mean, you literally ate cockroaches for a role. That's not method acting, that's just weird." The comment landed like a slap. Several audience members gasped audibly, and even Kimmel's sidekick Guillermo looked uncomfortable from his position off stage. Cage's jaw tightened, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair with white-knuckled intensity. "Weird?" Cage repeated, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "You think dedication to craft is weird? You think pushing boundaries and exploring the depths of human experience is something to mock?" Kimmel, either oblivious to the danger or deliberately provocative, pressed forward. "I'm just saying, maybe sometimes a little self-awareness goes a long way. Like, we all remember the memes, right? The over-the-top reactions, the B-movie jokes. Social media has been having a field day with your performances for years." The studio fell into an uncomfortable silence. Even the camera operators seemed to sense they were witnessing something unprecedented. Cage slowly rose from his chair, his full height casting a shadow across Kimmel's desk. "You want to talk about memes and social media mockery?" Cage's voice began to rise, each word carefully enunciated. "You want to reduce 3 decades of filmography, of countless hours perfecting a craft, to internet jokes made by people who've never stepped foot on a movie set?" Kimmel's confidence began to waver as he realized his guest was genuinely angry. "Hey, I'm just having some fun here. It's comedy, Nick. Lighten up." "Lighten up?" Cage's voice cracked like thunder. "You invite me onto your show under the pretense of promoting my work, then spend your time belittling everything I've dedicated my life to achieving. You sit behind that desk making jokes about actors while you've never taken a single risk in your entire career." The audience was completely silent now, some pulling out phones to record what was clearly becoming a historic television moment. Kimmel's writers in the back looked panicked, frantically trying to signal their host to change direction. "Look, I think you're taking this a little too seriously," Kimmel stammered, his usual composure cracking. "It's just entertainment." Cage leaned forward, his hands pressed firmly on Kimmel's desk. "Entertainment? You think humiliating your guests is entertainment? You think using your platform to tear down artists who've spent their lives perfecting their craft is funny?" The intensity in Cage's eyes was unmistakable now. That same raw energy that had made him a legend on screen now directed squarely at his host. Kimmel shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly unprepared for this level of confrontation. "I've won an Academy Award," Cage continued, his voice rising with each word. I've worked with the greatest directors of our time. I've brought characters to life that have moved audiences to tears, to laughter, to fear. And you want to reduce all of that to memes and mockery? Kimmel tried to regain control, reaching for his water glass with shaking hands. I think maybe we should take a commercial break. No, Cage declared, his voice cutting through the suggestion like a blade. We're not done here. The studio lights seemed to dim, as if responding to the electric tension crackling between host and guest. Kimmel's usual arsenal of deflection tactics felt utterly inadequate against the raw fury emanating from the Academy Award winners standing before him. Security personnel stationed around the studio perimeter shifted nervously, unsure whether to intervene or let the confrontation play out for the cameras. You know what your problem is, Jimmy? Cage continued, his voice now carrying the full weight of decades in Hollywood. You've made a career out of being a parasite. You feed off the accomplishments of others, tear them down for laughs, and somehow convince yourself that makes you relevant. Kimmel's face flushed red, a mixture of embarrassment and anger. The comedian in him wanted to fire back with a cutting remark, but something in Cage's demeanor warned him that this wasn't the time for jokes. That's completely uncalled for, he managed, his voice smaller than usual. Uncalled for? Cage's laugh was bitter, devoid of any humor. What's uncalled for is inviting artists onto your show just to humiliate them. What's uncalled for is using your platform to perpetuate the very culture that destroys creativity in this industry. The camera operators, initially confused about whether to keep rolling, received frantic hand signals from the production team to continue filming. This was television gold, even if it was spiraling completely out of control. Cage began pacing behind the guest chair, his movements predatory and calculated. You want to talk about my performances being over the top? At least I commit to something. At least I put myself on the line. You hide behind that desk, making safe jokes about people who actually take risks. I'm not hiding behind anything, Kimmel protested, though his voice lacked conviction. This is my show, and I have every right to— Your show? Cage interrupted, spinning to face his host directly. This isn't your show, Jimmy. This is a corporate product designed to sell advertising space. You're just the smiling face they put on it because you're non-threatening enough not to scare away sponsors. The audience gasped audibly at the brutal assessment. Several people in the front rows were openly recording with their phones now, sensing they were witnessing a career-defining moment for both men. Kimmel's composure finally cracked completely. You're way out of line here, Nick. I've been nothing but respectful. Respectful? Cage's voice reached a crescendo that reverberated through the studio. You call mocking my dedication to my craft respectful? You call reducing my entire career to internet memes respectful? You wouldn't know respect if it slapped you across your smug face. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Kimmel stood up from behind his desk, his own anger finally matching his guest's intensity. All right, that's enough. You think you're some kind of tortured artist? You're just an actor who takes himself way too seriously. Takes himself too seriously? Cage stepped closer to the desk, his eyes blazing. I take the craft seriously because it deserves to be taken seriously. Unlike you, I don't phone it in every night and collect a paycheck for making fun of people who actually create something meaningful. The production team in the control room was in complete chaos. Some wanted to cut to commercial immediately, while others argued this was the most compelling television they'd ever produced. The executive producer, watching from the booth, made the decision to let it continue, knowing this footage would be dissected and analyzed for months. You know what, Nick? Kimmel's voice dripped with venom now. Maybe the internet memes exist for a reason. Maybe people laugh at your performances because they're laughable. Maybe all that method acting is just an excuse for bad acting. The insult landed like a physical blow. Cage's entire body went rigid, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. The studio fell into absolute silence, every person present understanding they had just witnessed a line being crossed from which there might be no return. Bad acting? Cage's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried more menace than any shout. You have the audacity to question my abilities? You, who's never created anything original in your entire pathetic career? Kimmel, perhaps realizing he had gone too far, tried to backtrack. Look, maybe we both got a little heated here. No, Jimmy. You don't get to walk this back now. Cage's voice grew stronger with each word. You wanted to tear me down on national television? You wanted to humiliate someone who's given everything to this industry? Then let's finish what you started. The studio audience sat frozen, witnessing what felt like a public execution. Some covered their mouths in shock, others leaned forward in morbid fascination. The energy in the room had transformed from entertainment to something far more primal and dangerous. Kimmel's handlers offstage were frantically trying to get his attention, making cutting motions across their throats and pointing toward the exit. But the host seemed trapped in his own making, unable to find an escape route from the verbal battlefield he had created. You think this is entertaining? Cage gestured broadly toward the stunned audience. Look at them, Jimmy. Look at their faces. They're not laughing at your jokes anymore. They're watching you destroy yourself in real time. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every micro-expression, every bead of sweat forming on Kimmel's forehead. The control room had given up trying to manage the situation, instead focusing on getting the best possible footage of what would undoubtedly become legendary television. I've dedicated my life to transforming into other people, to finding truth in fiction, Cage continued, his voice now carrying an almost theatrical quality that made his words even more devastating. But you're not even real when you're being yourself. You're a manufactured personality designed by focus groups and network executives. Kimmel's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air. His usual quick wit had completely abandoned him under the relentless assault from his guest. You want to know what real method acting looks like? Cage stepped around the desk, invading Kimmel's personal space. It's about vulnerability. It's about stripping away every defense mechanism and finding something authentic. Something you've never done in your entire career. The host finally found his voice, though it came out as a desperate croak. Security! Where the hell is security? Security? Cage laughed, the sound echoing through the stunned studio. You need protection from words, Jimmy? From honesty? This is exactly what I'm talking about. The moment someone challenges you, the moment someone refuses to play along with your little game, you run crying for help. Two security guards finally appeared at the edge of the stage, but they hesitated, unsure how to handle a situation that hadn't devolved into physical violence. This was a war of words, and interfering might make them look like they were silencing an artist expressing his views. You know what the tragedy is? Cage's voice dropped to a more conversational tone, which somehow made his words even more cutting. You had the opportunity to have a real conversation tonight. You could have asked about my process, my passion, my journey. Instead, you chose to be another voice in the chorus of mediocrity that plagues this industry. Kimmel finally stood up fully, his chair rolling backward and hitting the backdrop. You're insane, he said, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. This is completely unhinged behavior. Insane? Cage's eyes flashed with renewed fire. What's insane is a system that rewards people like you for tearing down people like me. What's insane is that you make millions of dollars annually for reading jokes other people write while actual artists struggle for recognition. The audience was completely captivated now, some openly filming despite posted policies against recording. Social media notifications were already pinging across phones as clips began circulating online, tagged with phrases like "Cage destroys Kimmel" and "most brutal talk show moment ever." I've worked with Martin Scorsese, the Coen brothers, Spike. Johns, Cage continued, his voice building again. I've brought characters to life that will outlive both of us. And you think you have the right to mock that legacy? You think your opinion matters when measured against decades of actual achievement? Kimmel tried desperately to regain some semblance of control. This is my show. You can't come in here and— And what? Cage interrupted. Tell the truth. Expose. The fact that you're nothing more than a playground bully with a television contract? The audience deserves to see who you really are when someone doesn't play along with your scripted nonsense. The security guards took a tentative step forward, but Cage held up a hand. Don't worry, gentlemen. I'm not going to lay a finger on your precious host. I don't need to resort to violence when words are so much more effective. He turned back to Kimmel, who was now visibly trembling. You see, Jimmy, this is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. For years, celebrities have come on your show and smiled politely while you made them the butt of your jokes. They played along because it was expected, because it was part of the game. Cage's voice grew quieter but more intense. But I'm not playing your game anymore. The studio had become a pressure cooker of tension, every person present feeling the weight of witnessing something that would forever change late-night television. Kimmel stood behind his desk like a cornered animal, his usual confidence completely shattered by the relentless verbal assault from his guest. You want to know what the real tragedy is here? Cage stepped back slightly, giving himself space to address not just Kimmel, but the entire audience. It's that millions of people watch this show every night, expecting to see their favorite celebrities share stories and connect with fans. Instead, they get this manufactured cruelty disguised as comedy. The cameras captured every nuance of Cage's performance, because that's what this had become. A masterclass in controlled fury and articulate rage. His years of experience channeling intense emotions on screen had prepared him for this moment of raw, unscripted truth. Jimmy, you've built your career on the premise that nothing is sacred, that everyone and everything is fair game for ridicule, Cage continued, his voice carrying to the back rows of the studio. But you've forgotten that behind every joke is a human being who has feelings, dreams, and dignity. Kimmel finally found his voice, though it came out as a pathetic whisper. I was just doing comedy. It's what people expect. No, Cage said firmly. What people expect is respect. They expect professionalism. They expect you to elevate the conversation, not drag it down into the gutter with cheap shots and playground insults. The audience began to murmur among themselves, some nodding in agreement with Cage's words. The spell of Kimmel's manufactured charm was breaking in real time, replaced by an uncomfortable recognition of the truth being spoken. You see, everyone? Cage gestured toward the crowd. This is what happens when someone finally says no. When someone refuses to be your punching bag for the sake of promoting a movie. The real Jimmy Kimmel emerges, petty, cruel, and completely unprepared for anyone who fights back. Security guards moved closer, but Cage held up both hands peacefully. I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of having me removed by force. I'm going to walk out of here with my dignity intact, something you lost a long time ago, he began, moving toward the edge of the stage, his movements deliberate and controlled. The audience watched in stunned silence as the most explosive talk show confrontation in television history reached its climax. Before I go, Cage turned back one final time, his voice carrying across the silent studio. I want everyone watching at home to remember this moment. Remember what happens when someone with actual talent and integrity refuses to be diminished by a hack who mistakes cruelty for comedy. Kimmel made one last desperate attempt to salvage his dignity. You're making a huge mistake. You'll never work in this town again. Cage's laugh was genuine now, filled with a confidence that had been building throughout the entire confrontation. Jimmy, I've been working in this town since before you knew what a television camera was. I'll be working here long after people forget your name. The words hit like a final nail in a coffin. Kimmel slumped back into his chair, completely defeated, while Cage strode toward the exit with the bearing of a conquering hero. Ladies and gentlemen, Cage called out to the audience as he reached the edge of the stage, Thank you for witnessing something real tonight. In a world of manufactured entertainment, sometimes the truth is the most shocking thing of all. With that, Nicolas Cage walked off the Jimmy Kimmel live stage, leaving behind a stunned audience, a humiliated host, and what would become the most talked-about moment in late-night television history. The cameras continued rolling as Kimmel sat in stunned silence, unable to form words or even attempt to recover from the verbal decimation he had just endured. Security personnel followed Cage as he exited, not to restrain him but to ensure his safe passage through what was certain to become a media frenzy outside the studio. The audience slowly began to process what they had witnessed, phones buzzing with notifications as social media exploded with clips and commentary. In the control room, producers scrambled to decide whether to air the footage or bury it, knowing that either choice would have massive consequences. But the decision was already out of their hands. Too many people had recorded the confrontation, and within minutes, clips were spreading across every platform on the internet. As Cage disappeared through the studio doors, he left behind more than just a humiliated host. He had exposed the hollow nature of manufactured celebrity culture and reminded everyone present that some things, talent, integrity, and human dignity, should never be sacrificed for cheap laughs. The confrontation would spark widespread discussion about respect and professionalism in the entertainment industry, ultimately leading to a significant drop in Kimmel's ratings and raising serious questions about his conduct as a host.